So today I'd like to present our work on breaking face authentication using 3D reconstruction and virtual reality. Our work is titled Virtual You, Defeating Face Liveness Detection by Building Virtual Models from Your Public Photos. This work was conducted at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill by me, True Price, along with Yizu, Jan-Michael Frahm, and Fabian Monrose. Face authentication has become popular in recent years as a form of biometric security. The idea is fairly intuitive. Simply show your face to a camera, and the authentication system will verify it's actually you. This form of security is convenient. For example, the image on the left demonstrates a hands-free ticket reservation, where the face serves as a sort of individualized proof of purchase. From a business perspective, face authentication seems like a convenient and sophisticated way to offer security to consumers. Indeed, companies like MasterCard, whose face authentication software is shown in the figure on the right, along with Amazon, Intel with McAfee, and Microsoft, have all worked on developing face authentication software. It's clear, though, that the protocol for face authentication must be robust to attacks. There's been a cat and mouse game in the field over the last several years. At the Black Hat Security Conference in 2009, for example, it was demonstrated that face authentication software on commercial laptops could be bypassed simply by showing the system a still image of the user. In the early days, authentication largely relied on face shape and ignored the question of whether the system was observing a real human face. To avoid still image spoofing, liveness detection methods were introduced. This form of authentication requires users to, for example, blink their eyes or rotate their head. Of course, simple liveness detection can be easily exploited if a video of the user performing the task is available. Blink detection is even easier to bypass. As I've done here, it's possible to Photoshop a picture of the victim such that their eyes are closed. The system can then be hacked by simply flipping between the open and closed eye images. A powerful way to avoid 2D image-based attacks is to leverage camera motion. When a real face is presented to the camera, and the camera moves, the shape of the face observed by the camera will change in a predictable way, because the real face has 3D structure. In technical terms, this method leverages camera parallax. When a flat image of the user is presented to the system, either printed out or displayed on a screen, there's no underlying 3D shape, so it's relatively easy to identify the image as a fake. A proposed attack against motion consistency is to use a 3D printed mask of the victim. Since these masks have 3D shape, they're indistinguishable from a real face as far as motion consistency is concerned. These masks are very lifelike, are relatively inexpensive, they can be bought for about $300 online, and can be made from a single good front view photo of the victim. A key limitation, however, is that these masks cannot completely defeat liveness detection if the detection involves actions like raising the eyebrows or smiling. We propose an alternative attack that can defeat these liveness detection methods, while at the same time being easier to implement and less restrictive than 3D printed masks. To this end, we introduce Virtual You, a new virtual reality-based attack on face authentication systems solely using publicly available photos of the victim. We collect images of the victim from online, then use those images to create a 3D reconstruction of the person's face. This reconstruction is rendered on a virtual display, such as a phone, which is then presented to an authenticating camera. Since the VR system renders the face as if it were a 3D object, the face authentication system is tricked into accepting the virtual display as a real human face. Here's an overview of our pipeline. We first collect publicly available photos of the victim from online. Then, we detect facial landmarks in each image. Next, we leverage data from all input images to obtain a 3D reconstruction of the victim's face. After that, we texture the model using one of the input photos, and we correct for the gaze of this textured image so that it looks forward. At this point, we have a neutral, textured model of the victim's face, which we can then animate and visualize in a virtual reality system. In general, controlled, high-resolution frontal views, like this one highlighted here, are able to easily defeat face authentication systems using our method. However, an important aspect of our work is that online photos can be leveraged when high-quality photos like this are unavailable. We're able to leverage everything from group photos, where the victim is forward-facing, but the face is often only tens of pixels in size in the image. We're also able to leverage casual photos, where the face is larger, but not necessarily forward-facing, or possibly there's strange or bad lighting in the scene. And also high-resolution, forward-facing photos if available. The more publicly available photos someone has, the more likely it is that our attack will be successful. Also note that for our experiments here, we extracted the faces manually from the photos, which is a realistic action of an adversary in this type of attack. The first step after photo selection is to identify landmark points in the face, like points on the eyes or mouth. We use an automatic tool to perform this extraction, and the process overall is robust to head rotation and size in the image. After extraction, we next perform a 3D reconstruction of the victim's face. Accurately recovering this face shape is vital to spoofing face authentication systems. We break the face modeling into two components, identity and expression. Identity is the underlying shape of the face. For instance, the face can go from narrow to wide for different individuals, or maybe the eyes are closer set or farther apart. Expression is an image-specific characteristic. For instance, a person could be frowning or smiling. We can combine these two dimensions to create a wide array of possible faces. First, let's talk about reconstructing a face from a single image. We'll talk about using multiple images next. We can model the shape of someone's face, S in the equation here, as a base face, shown in the middle, offset by identity and expression components. We have two predefined bases for identity and expression, which encode variations away from the base face. So, the goal is, given an input image, define person-specific identity coefficients and photo-specific expression coefficients that best explain the detected 2D landmarks. The key idea for face modeling is reprojection. Given face shape and pose, we can project 3D landmarks into the image and compare with 2D landmarks that are detected. We minimize error in pose, meaning how the head is oriented relative to the camera, and face shape, that is, the identity and expression coefficients. We sum reprojection error for all landmarks based on the 2D distance between the projected and detected landmarks. We also normalize the coefficients of identity and expression, which helps constrain the solution. Here's a visualization of the process. We start out with an initial estimate of pose, identity, and expression, as shown on the left. We can reproject the individual 3D landmarks, shown in red, onto the image and compare their position to the position of the detected 2D landmarks, shown in green. We optimize using nonlinear regression, and after a few iterations, come up with pose, identity, and expression parameters that minimize the difference between the detected 2D points and the reprojected 3D points. Here's the reconstruction result using a single input image. If we overlay the front-facing image based on the estimated projection, we observe that some parts of the face, such as the nose and the mouth, line up well. However, other areas are not very accurate, especially in crucial areas for face authentication, such as the eyes. You can also observe that the head rotation of the image has biased the reconstruction result. To obtain better face reconstructions, we propose to use multiple input images. When modeling based on multiple images, the idea is to recover a separate reconstruction for each individual image. Each reconstruction has a unique pose and expression. Importantly, however, using multiple images allows us to robustly recover the same underlying identity for the individual. Here's the result using a single image compared to multiple images. As you can see, the projected 3D face lines up much better with the front-facing image, and key areas like the eyes are captured very accurately. After 3D reconstruction, we texture the face using a single input image. Due to head rotation, there will inevitably be areas in the face that will lack color based on direct texturing. We can fill in these colors, say, using a predefined base texture or mirroring the face, but this also often leads to undesired artifacts. A common approach is to impute the color using 2D Poisson editing, which often gives a more convincing result. We find that extending to 3D Poisson editing leads to better texture imputation. More information about this step can be found in our paper. Typically, face authentication systems expect the user to be looking forward. However, this may not be the case for our texture reconstruction. We correct for eye gaze by analyzing the color distribution of the eye region in the reconstruction, then aligning this color space to the color space of a predefined forward-looking eye. The forward-gazing eye is recolored using the color space mapping, and the eye region is then updated on our reconstruction. The end result, shown here, is a front-facing, textured facial reconstruction of the victim. So, to summarize up to this point, we begin with photos of the victim, extract landmarks in each, reconstruct the victim's face, texture the face, and correct for eye gaze. The next steps are to animate the reconstruction and to visualize it in a virtual display. The identity coefficients estimated over all input images give us a face with neutral underlying expression. We can then modify this neutral face with alternative predefined expression coefficients. This is a powerful aspect of our approach. We can effectively animate the reconstruction with arbitrary expressions, allowing us to perform tasks expected of liveness detection methods. We can display the animated reconstruction on a device like a smartphone. We add an external printed marker, say pasted on the wall, so that the VR system can track its position in the real world. The reason for the marker is that the inertial data on the smartphone will provide us with information about the rotation of the device, but we need an external reference to recover the device's translation in the real world. Finally, the VR environment is shown to the authentication device. Here's an example of the reconstruction displayed in our VR system. Note how the face appears to have stable 3D position as the phone is moved around in the real world. Now, I'd like to present some experiments we performed on 5 state-of-the-art commercially available face authentication systems: Keylemon, Mobius, Intel's TrueKey, BioID, and OneU. Of these systems, 2 require some form of user interaction, and the other 3 use motion-based liveness detection, requiring the user to rotate their head. We're also fairly certain that 4 of these systems use some form of additional texture-based liveness detection. I'll note that Keylemon is a desktop-based system, while the other systems are smartphone apps. Of the systems, we consider Keylemon and TrueKey to be widely used systems based on the reported number of installations. Here's some information on the experimental data. We collected data from 14 males and 6 females, aged 24 to 44, and having various ethnicities. We registered the face of each subject to all 5 previously mentioned face authentication systems. We then conducted 2 experiments. First, we took a single front view photo of the subject in the same room that we used for system registration. Second, we collected publicly available online photos of the individuals to perform our multiple image-based attack. We collected between 3 and 27 photos per person of various qualities. We didn't limit ourselves to only recent photos of the participants, so there's potentially strong change in appearance over time for some individuals. Here are our results using the single high-resolution front-facing indoor image. As you can see, using the single image for reconstruction, we were able to successfully spoof all 5 commercially available systems 100% of the time for all 20 participants. Obviously, this is a significant result, and it demonstrates the capabilities of our method. For online photos, the success was not as great, but still quite high. Keylemon was spoofed by 85% of the reconstructions, Mobius by 80%, TrueKey by 70%, BioID by 55%, and we were unable to spoof the OneU system using online images. The average number of tries relates to our texturing approach, which only uses a single image. As adversaries, we begin with the image we think will work best for texturing. If that image fails, we try the next image, and so on, until the test succeeds or all images have been tried. I'll note that the online photo-based attack worked on at least 1 system for all but 2 participants. These participants both had only a very small number of low-resolution photos available. Regarding OneU and BioID, our opinion is that the low success with these systems stems from their sensitivity to changes in appearance and illumination. OneU, for example, only takes a single photo to learn the user's face. If a user registers their face indoors and then tries to unlock the system outdoors, these 2 systems in particular have a high false rejection rate. Here are some general observations about the results. First, we find that medium and high-resolution images are most useful for our attack. We found that professional photos from events like weddings are a good source for such images. Second, we found that group photos, while lower resolution, provide consistent frontal views of the victim, which is helpful in accurately obtaining face shape. I'll note that professional photos and group photos are very hard to control online, as others can post them without the victim's knowledge. The takeaway is that a few low-resolution forward-facing photos, plus 1 or 2 high-resolution photos for texturing, are adequate for our attack. I'll show some experiments supporting this claim in the following slides. We first examine the effect of image resolution on reconstruction quality. This is especially important for group photo images. The question we ask is, how small can they be to still be useful? To this end, we tried performing reconstruction using downsized versions of the indoor forward-facing image, with the chin to forehead distance from 20 to 50 pixels. Results are over all 20 participants for 3 of the systems. As you can see, very low resolution front-facing reconstructions fail to spoof the systems. However, the systems are increasingly easy to spoof as resolution increases, with nearly 100% spoofing with a resolution of 50 pixels, which is still fairly low resolution. And an additional question we'd like to ask is, how does head rotation affect reconstruction? For all 20 sample users, we collected multiple indoor photos with yaw angle, that is, rotation to the left or right, varying from 5 degrees, which is approximately front-facing, to 40 degrees, which is a significantly rotated view. We then performed 3D reconstruction for each image, for each user, on the same 3 face authentication systems. As you can see, when the yaw angle is roughly forward-facing, the spoof rate is very high, and it drops off fairly quickly with increasing head rotation. So, one thing we noticed is, in general, individuals will have at least one medium to high resolution rotated photo online, and potentially several low-resolution front-facing group photos. A final question we've asked is, can we improve our spoof rate by combining low-resolution photos with a high-res rotated photo for texturing? To test this, we took our indoor low-resolution photos and the rotated photos from the previous experiment and combined them in our multi-image reconstruction approach. As you can see from the graph, right now here's showing the single rotated image, and now here's showing the additional low-resolution images. Spoof rate increased quite a bit for images with 20 and 30-degree head rotation. So, since we have the ability to rotate the head and animate the face in our VR environment, we argue that our virtual use system is successful against liveness detection defenses of commercially available face authentication systems. Because our VR display naturally rotates as the device moves, we also argue that our system can defeat motion consistency-based defenses. To demonstrate this, we implemented a motion detection defense by Lee et al. Titled, "Seeing Your Face is Not Enough." The basic idea of this system is that camera motion and observed head pose are predictable when a real 3D face is presented to the system. We collect inertial sensor data from the authenticating device, in this case a smartphone, and we estimate head pose, that is, the direction the head is facing, based on the input of the authenticating camera. As the camera moves in front of the face, we have a time series of rotational data for the device, as well as a time series of estimated head pose. After some normalization, we train a classifier in these 2 time series, which is able to distinguish between real data and spoofed data. Lee et al. Originally tried their method to identify video spoof data. We replicate their tests, and we also try their method with our VR-based attack. Our first experiment uses the same classification scheme as the original approach. To train the classifier, we take a set of real video inputs as positive inputs, and a set of video spoofs as negative inputs. On the separate testing data, the learned classifier correctly verifies almost all real faces, while at the same time correctly rejecting almost all video spoofs. However, when this classifier is presented with our VR spoof, nearly all inputs are incorrectly identified as real data. Of course, it's unfair to test our attack on a classifier that hasn't been trained to recognize it. So we additionally trained a classifier using both video spoofs and our VR attack as negative training data. When we tested this classifier, it was able to correctly reject video-based attacks. However, there was also a strong amount of confusion between real face inputs and our VR-based spoof. Close to a third of real inputs were incorrectly rejected, while at the same time, half of our VR spoofs were accepted as real faces. When we removed video data entirely, the results were almost identical. Precision is only somewhat better than random chance. The real face rejection rate is simply too high. Any system using this classifier would have to allow for multiple authentication attempts, which in turn would increase the probability of a successful VR spoof. So, what are the possible mitigations to this type of attack? We believe with sufficient effort on the part of the adversary, our attack can likely defeat approaches that rely solely on color video for input. There's simply too much potential for realism in VR. In our opinion, changes in hardware are the best defense. For example, infrared imaging effectively provides a heat map of the scene rather than visual input. In this domain, a real user looks entirely different from a flat display. Another option is to employ random structured light projection. In this case, a random light pattern is projected onto the face and then recognized by the authenticating system. In this case, the adversary would need to have advanced knowledge of the projected light pattern in order to simulate it on the reconstructed face. Of course, the trade-off is that both these methods involve specialized hardware that would likely only be used for face authentication. One immediate suggestion that we have is that texture detection in current face authentication software could be improved. In our experiments, we have found that even low-resolution textures work surprisingly well in spoofing the systems. For instance, we were surprised to find that our 50-pixel reconstructions, like the one shown on the right here, worked as well as they did. There may be a few restrictions to mitigating this problem. For instance, it may be difficult to differentiate these artifacts from noise in low-quality authenticating cameras. Another issue is that face authentication systems typically store a minimum amount of user data for privacy reasons. So texture detection probably won't be able to leverage data like prior photos of the user. Still, detecting low-resolution textures is something we believe face authentication developers can focus on in the near future. So, to conclude, we've introduced a new VR-based attack on face authentication systems solely leveraging publicly available photos of the victim. This attack bypasses existing defenses of liveness detection and motion consistency. At a minimum, we suggest that face authentication software must improve against VR-based attacks with low-resolution textures, and that additional improvements can be made by introducing additional hardware. We claim that the increasing ubiquity of VR will continue to challenge computer vision-based authentication systems. We think that the ability of an adversary to recover an individual's facial characteristics through online photos is an immediate and very serious threat, albeit one that cannot be completely neutralized in the age of social media. And with that, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
So out of the 5 systems that you tested against the online attacks, there was one system where there was a considerably lower success rate than on the other ones.
Yeah.
Do you know any reasons why? So what do they do differently than the others?
So for that's the one system, they only take one photo of the user when they're training their system to recognize the user's face. So we found that if there's strong light changes, we registered all the users indoors, and if you go outdoors to say test the system out, it doesn't work as well. So the idea is a lot of online photos also people take pictures outside and post them online. It's hard to get the exact same appearance based on one photo alone, or have robustness against changes in appearance. Even if someone grows a beard or something like that, I think we found that it was another thing that could hurt our success with that system. So,
can you speaking of beards, can you clarify the motion consistency attack? So, is it the camera authenticating you is moving, and you're supposed to hold your head still?
Basically, yeah.
But what you do is the camera is moving, and you take your phone, the fake VR image, and you move it kind of in parallel to the camera?
Yes, I have a slide specifically for this.
Oh, good.
Showing our... That's not the slide, sorry. So this is actually how we did our setup for that.
Yeah, okay.
We took Google Cardboard, which, you can see the two faces there. If you wear Google Cardboard, it's a really cheap VR experience. What we did is we took out one of the lenses, and we put the authentication device where the camera would be or in the viewing part of the cardboard. And then we put our VR systems on the other side of it, cut a hole so we could track the outside world. And then this provided a chassis that we could move both cameras simultaneously with a consistent motion between them.
Right. So do you have, like, you're showing two faces on the VR. Is that meant to provide a 3D, like,
I mean, you could,
glass?
you only need one face. We don't show both faces
Okay.
to the camera.
All right.
It's just, it's based on the VR software, it was easier to implement with two faces and just
So the VR software was meant to be used with Google
for like
Cardboard.
stereo vision
Yeah.
and
Okay.
the actual 3D shape, but yeah.
We have time for another question. Then thank you. Let's thank the speaker again.
Thank you.